with Iran. So, Scott, help us understand these developments, in particular, this idea that Iran would target even European assets or U.S. assets in Europe, NATO assets in case of a future attack, as well as more talk about Trump considering the nuclear option. What do you make of all this?
News cycle, and people have to fill the gap with something. Look, why would Iran strike European targets? I mean, I know there's people out there frothing at the mouth because Iran's won the war, and why not go in for the kill and all this. But Iran's not stupid. Why complicate the mix? It's not just about the military aspect. I don't think Iran's losing any sleep over the prospect of a NATO retaliatory strike. But the diplomatic and economic aspects cannot be ignored. And, Iran right now is in a position where the United States is increasingly isolated. It's winning on this front of getting the United States to leave the Gulf. One of the reasons why the United States would leave the Gulf is that, it feels abandoned by its NATO allies. And so let's just have Iran just give the United States a big gift. Hey, Iran, those European countries that really aren't having impact whatsoever on the war you're having with the United States and Israel, attack them. And now what you'll do is you make them politically close to the United States. See, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of military force to get Donald Trump excited. He just has to believe that Europe has come to, honored his call. And it changes the psychology. And since we're dealing with an emotionally unstable president, it would do it in a manner which is moving in the opposite direction Iran wants the United States to be moving. Iran wants the United States to be leaving the Middle East, not coming back to the Middle East with European assistance. And the military help that Europe is providing is nothing. Why didn't, for all you big, bold, brave Iranian armchair generals, why didn't Iran attack Israel last time around? I mean, American tankers were coming out of Israel. But that's what's happening in Bulgaria and Romania. So why not attack Israel? Well, didn't want to expand the conflict now, did they? It's the same thing. So I just think this is just stupidity in the extreme. There might be people in Iran that are talking about this, talking tough. But the notion that Iran is going to strike Europe is absurd. The United States has recognized there is no military solution to this problem. That's why Donald Trump's gone to the massive economic sanctions, or whatever the hell he's going to call this package, as if we've never heard these words before. I think we've put this pressure on Iran in the past, and it's never worked, and it isn't going to work this time. And this is reflective of the fact that Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. What we do know is he can't use military force to seize the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon has told him as such, and so he's gone to Plan B. It will fail. But the last thing Iran would be doing is attacking Europe. I mean, again, I don't make Iranian policy for the Iranians, but I couldn't think of a dumber move than that. It's stupid. It doesn't need to happen. All the pressure, if the conflict is resumed, all the pressure should be on punishing those nations in the region that helped the United States, not trying to get Europe to join the United States or somehow, embolden Donald Trump. So there's that. On nuclear, look, I've said this all along, and people, can listen to the way they want. If the United States is faced with, existential defeat, it will use nuclear weapons. It's just the way it is, guys. It's just the way it's going to be. It doesn't mean we're going to use them, because we're not faced with an existential defeat yet. We're faced with political embarrassment. There's a difference. And then the other thing, people are like, Iran's got to build their own nuclear weapon. Well, there's no greater way to guarantee an American nuclear strike against Iran than Iran building a nuclear weapon. I mean, right now, the talk of a nuclear weapon seems to be focused on Pickaxe Mountain, where there's a deep underground facility where Iran may or may not be doing things of a nuclear nature. I don't see the Iranians moving in that direction. Again, the son of Ayatollah Khomeini has assumed the mantle of the supreme leader. His father made it a point to make nuclear weapons, against Islam, haram, and they just beat the United States and Israel using conventional weapons. There's really no need for them to do this. They gain nothing from it. The United States was beaten militarily. Right now, the United States recognizes that it can't achieve its goals using conventional weapons, and the United States is pulling away from military confrontation, going to an economic siege. This will probably fail, which means the United States will have to eventually find some sort of diplomatic outcome. And so as long as Iran isn't building a nuclear bomb, I don't think there's anything to worry about. But, if the Iranians start getting bold and saying, we have a nuclear weapon, I would start worrying that, we saw the United States say, when we diminished our long-range precision strike weapons globally, meaning that we don't have enough to fight China or Russia in the Pacific or European theaters, not to say least what continue this conflict in Iran. What did the Trump administration do? They re-examined their nuclear posture and said, well, we're going to lower the threshold for using tactical nuclear weapons. We're going to use them a lot earlier in any potential conflict. Why? Because they got no other weapons to use. And so it is a dangerous situation. What you want to do, if you're the Iranians, is preclude the United States from feeling tempted to use nuclear weapons. And you do that by not expanding the conflict so that it becomes an existential one for the United States. Right now, all the United States has suffered is embarrassment. I mean, if the Middle East was this important to us, we'd be taking a different approach to the Middle East. But Trump, in his national security strategy document that was published in the fall of 2025, has, or fall of 2025, has said, we want to unplug from both Europe and the Middle East. We're not interested in these long-term, drawn-out wars. And so that's his natural inclination. So let him go. Don't do anything to keep him there. Let the United States withdraw. There will have to be, you had an Iranian senior negotiator, the Speaker of the Parliament, I believe, show up in Iraq yesterday or the day before and say that Iran understands that the United States needs a politically elegant exit strategy, that they have to save face. So the Iranians get it. They understand what this is about. It's about saving face. It's about giving Donald Trump a politically viable exit strategy, which is the smartest thing in the world to do. And if you do that, you take nuclear weapons off the table. There's no reason to use them, no justification, and no desire on the part of Trump to do this. So I think, but we have to recognize that they're on the table. They're being talked about. And this president, if given the right set of circumstances, would authorize nuclear weapons to be used. Of that, there is no doubt in my mind. I think it's an effort to create a narrative and spin the narrative in a way that's advantageous to the Trump administration. Again, I don't know the details. I'm not privy to the targeting undertaken by Central Command in the Strait of Hormuz area or the battle damage assessment. I don't know what the intent of the targeting is. It would make sense if I were a targeteer. I would be going after the radar systems that help guide these missiles in. But I would also understand that the Iranians know that I'm going after them, and the concept of redundancy isn't one that should be unknown to the Iranians. And unless we were 100% successful in destroying these radars, and I think recent activity in the Strait of Hormuz area indicates that we weren't, because some ships have in fact been struck recently. This just appears to be one of these situations where this is what we wanted, and therefore somebody has briefed a journalist on what we wanted and has hypothesized certain scenarios. What does it mean, escorted by a U.S. military? I don't think it means that U.S. ships are going through the strait. But we know that U.S. helicopters have been operating, and it may be that we have helicopters who are, escorting ships that have turned off their their onboard GPS trackers and are seeking to secretly navigate their way through while we jam Iranian radars. Who knows what's going on? But let's say that's happening. As you pointed out, the number of ships that are getting through is very minor. And the other problem is, I don't think there's an insurance company in the world that would say, I'll insure that. I think the United States was offering some sort of insurance alternative that maybe some ships have taken them up on. But this doesn't seem to be a program conducive to supporting large amounts of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. This seems to be a program where a lot of resources are being put in to get a very small result, and then you spin that result, to try and achieve some sort of politically beneficial dynamic in the media coverage. You get an article that says your ships are flowing through, but again, we don't know the veracity of this. Let's just assume that some, if not all, of the reporting is true. It's still so minuscule in terms of what's happening as to, negate its impact on the global economy, which is what this is all about. Is enough shipping getting through with enough energy-related resources to restore, global energy balance? And I think the answer there is no. Well, let's say that, use the Syria analogy. So you're saying that the starvation began in 2016 and it led to the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in 2024, December. So, I'm not much of a mathematician, but that would imply somewhere around 8 years. There's 2 years left in the Trump administration. Whoever takes over after Trump is going to be finding a world completely different, and the person will hopefully have a little bit more functioning brain power than to try and continue failed policies. Trump isn't going to strangle Iran to death in 2 years. That's not going to happen. How are they planning on doing this? I mean, one of the things is that they're going to sanction the hell out of anybody who dares buy anything from Iran, like oil. You know how long that sanction the hell out of them policy is going to work when China buys Iranian oil? It's not going to work at all. India, it's not going to work. Don't forget that I think it's next month that Xi Jinping showing up in New York. Trump will be there for the General Assembly debate, but Xi Jinping isn't going to be speaking at the United Nations. He's just coming in for a meeting, a state visit. He's going to actually go to the White House and have a state visit with Trump. Trump wants this more than anything in the world. Do you really think that state visit is going to be the success that Trump wants if Trump is sanctioning the hell out of Chinese companies buying Iranian oil? Trump doesn't even know what he's doing right now. He hasn't even thought this one through. And so, no, I don't think it's possible that the United States will be able to economically strangle Iran. First of all, Iran has some big supporters in Russia and in China, who both have a vested interest in, having Iran, survive and thrive. But right now, survival modes means that there needs to be trade with Iran, and there needs to be economic activity. Russia will continue to supply Iran with what Russia's supplying. China will do the same thing. And I don't think Russia or China care about American sanctions, primary or secondary at this point. And if the United States gets too crazy with China, China holds all the cards, literally. So I just think what happened is the president got a briefing from the Pentagon that said, Mr. President, there are no military options available to us regarding the Strait of Hormuz. And so he just panicked and he tweeted out this tweet, or he had somebody write it up for him and they sent it out. It's not coordinated policy. They haven't thought this thing through. I said, please square the one for me. You can help me here if you have any ideas how this works. But so Scott Bessent told the president that I can strangle the crap out of Iran. And we need secondary sanctions. Anybody who buys any Iranian oil, we're going to pound. And the president's already said, I will sanction you to 1,000% or whatever percent he throws out there. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio's knocking on the door to China saying, hey, we got this state visit thing coming up. We know you're going to come out. It's going to be really cool. It's nice. We'll put out red carpet, big deal. Bands, soldiers marching, and we love you. We're trying to keep the door open. Things are going to be nice. Part of the charm offensive that Trump seems to be going on. And those two policies don't work. They don't blend. What happens when Iran sells oil to China? Which they're doing now and they will continue to do. Does Trump sanction Chinese oil companies? Sanctions the Chinese refineries? China's already gone on record telling them earlier, pound sand. Remember that? The secondary sanctions against Chinese buyers of Iranian oil. And the Chinese government went, keep buying it, guys. We're going to back you up 100%. And they did. I don't think China's policies changed any. So this tweet that he put out, it wasn't coordinated with anybody. It's just made up stuff, and it won't survive. And all we know about Donald Trump is let's just wait 24, 36 hours. He'll put out another tweet that changes this. So there we are. Well, I mean, first of all, Turkey has a lot of front companies then with the Iranians. Georgia has some. I'm sure, the Pakistanis got a bunch. Turkmenistan, the Iranians have been doing this stuff for a long time. They're very good at they're very good at evading sanctions. I don't know, what Trump is talking about. Again, the Department of Treasury has come in and given him a briefing, probably backed up by the CIA. I'm familiar with these because we used to see these same briefings when it came to trying to stop the Iraqis from breaking sanctions. We look for front companies everywhere in Europe using Palestinian proxies, the whole thing. So I know these briefings inside and out, and I know what the Department of Treasury has put together. I know what the CIA's put together. And I also know that past experience shows that a lot of it's just wrong. It's just bad analysis. Somebody didn't connect the right dots. It's incomplete, meaning that there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening that they're not aware of, that's not reported. And at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to stop. Because the way these front companies operate, you'd have to go in and shut down, all of Jordan's banking industry. You'd have to go in, get the Swiss to stop playing games. You'd have to, go into, Slovakia and the Czech Republic because some of the banking stuff. The people that do this for a living, smugglers, and the people that go around sanctions, they're very clever. They've been doing this for an awful long time, and they have, shell companies, fake companies, false leads. They've been avoiding detection for decades. So, Trump received a briefing and thinks that he's empowered with information sufficient to have an impact on the situation. I don't believe he is. I don't think the United States has ever been empowered to that degree where they can speak about, an economic D-Day. But this is just the stupidity of the people surrounding Donald Trump who have allowed this kind of language to, infiltrate his social media postings. I just think he's the wrong man for the job. I think he's a man who exists to please Donald Trump. I don't think he has any grand, innovative global economic strategies. I think he lives every day, putting out one fire after another fire after another fire. Right now his job is to bring stability to a bond market that's been destroyed because, the bond market requires global stability and, especially U.S. bonds. And there's none of that from the United States. There's no confidence in the United States. There's no underlying plan that generates the kind of confidence that would make, purchasing U.S. Treasuries, worthwhile at this time. So he's putting out fires. A large aspect of, putting out a bond-related fire is confidence. Do people have confidence? And so he has to project an air of confidence. But, he's in pure panic mode. So is the United States government. We're in trouble. The American people should wake up to the fact that Donald Trump is literally destroying the economy of the United States, and with it, threatening to destroy the economies of much of the world, who are heavily invested in U.S. Treasury. So, Look, if you want to dig deeper into Scott Bessent, go talk to Michael Hudson or talk to Richard Wolff or somebody with an economic background. I can just tell you that Bessent is just as useless as day is long when it comes to you know the kind of rational policy advice that should be being provided to the President of the United States. Nothing Bessent has done has worked. Nothing. For days, Ukraine fired over 1,400 drones, long-range drones, into Russia. 1,400. These drones have, anywhere from 10 to 20 kilograms of high explosive warhead. They go pop. The vast majority of these, as you said, 98% plus have been shot down. A handful have made it through to their targets where they go pop. Sometimes they go pop on a wild berries warehouse, and they cause tremendous fires inside, burning up cardboard boxes and things of that nature. A lot of flame, a lot of smoke. Sometimes they go pop on a refinery, and they cause some damage that requires the refinery to be shut down, and then repaired, and a week and a half, 2 weeks later, brought back online. Ukrainian drone attacks are inconvenient. In some places, they're more inconvenient than others. In some places, they don't matter at all. But it's a propaganda exercise. We know it is. It's designed to create the impression that Vladimir Putin can't defend Russia. Remember September 20th, the State Duma elections. The CIA and MI6 are basically trying to repeat, past attempts to undermine Russia domestically, politically. They did this in 2007, 2008. They tried again in 2011, 2012, and now they're making another run at it now. It's a form of regime change to indirectly attack the stability of Vladimir Putin by undercutting him at the State Duma to try and get the party or parties that support him removed or diminished in terms of their power. They do this by creating the impression of weakness or insufficiency on the part of Vladimir Putin. Previously, in 2007, it was about corruption. In 2011, 12 was about the economy. And now it's about the war. He can't defend you. I mean, you have people like Gilbert Doctorow suggesting that Putin's a coward. So, this seems to be the thematic going on. Let's just acknowledge that the Ukrainian drone war has failed, hasn't achieved what it wanted to achieve. Now, what has Russia done in response? Well, last night was an example of it. They held off for a couple of days, accumulating sufficient stockpiles of missiles, and then they fired them against targets that were relevant, and they destroyed them. You're not going to see too much of this talked about in the mainstream media or whatever, but to show you just how good the Russians are at targeting and why it's relevant, I think in the Bovary section of Kiev is a large petroleum storage facility that was struck extensively by the Russians. Some of the facilities that were struck carried petroleum products that were for civilian use, commercial use. It just means there's going to be an even greater gas shortage in Ukraine right now, that greater than what's already been achieved with Russia attacking about 400 gas stations. But they struck one that was exclusively for the Ukrainian military. This was the fuel that they had been hoarding up for a Ukrainian counterattack that was timed to begin short of the September 20th election. The purpose of this counterattack was to threaten Russian forces in the vicinity of Sumy and Kharkov, perhaps even to penetrate into Russian territory, similar to west of 2024, and to embarrass Vladimir Putin, to say, look, this man simply can't protect you. Look at what our military is doing. Well, that fuel no longer exists, which means all the vehicles that Ukraine was hoping could be driven towards the Russian border won't be driven anywhere. And the counterattack is pretty much over before it begins. This shows that the Russians are striking decisively. They know what targets to hit. The targets they're hitting have a real impact on on the situation. And this is the reality. Ukraine fires thousands you hit, and what they hit is insignificant. Russia fires dozens. They hit everything they aim at, and it's all destroyed. This is just simple military math. Ukraine the Russians are going to grind them down on this front as well. Came out from the 40-day war that Zelensky announced on June 25th was an expansion of the drone conflict to include striking targets in the Sea of Azov. There are many Russian ships in there. Over a dozen were attacked and hit, and also to expand the conflict into the Caspian Sea to threaten Russian shipping routes, between Russia and Iran, Russia and Turkmenistan, etc. And I think this was, an expansion that was ill thought out. So what Russia's done in return is to basically kick Ukraine out of the Black Sea. They're attacking all shipping. They're shutting down the ports of Odessa and other ports. They're denying Ukraine the ability to export grain. They're denying Ukraine the ability to import weapons and other critical, items for their economy. 60% of the Iranian economy is in danger of being shut down because of this. This is destroying Iran. Businesses are, going out of business. What little resources that that Ukraine had stockpiled are being burned up, and warehouses are being struck by Russia on a daily basis. You're looking at the economic strangulation of Ukraine today, and what you're doing is you're setting you're establishing the conditions of what conflict termination will look like. I think Russia's made a decision that Ukraine, especially its current configuration, cannot be permitted access to the Black Sea. Right now, they're denying it indirectly. I think one of Russia's long-term goals in this conflict is to deny it directly, meaning that Odessa will be occupied by the Russians and eventually be incorporated into Russia. Basically, what I did is I compared and contrasted where Russia was, diplomatically speaking, as recently as June of this year, where Vladimir Putin came out and said, in June he said that, this war is going to be fought. There's unconditional. We have strict, requirements, etc. But then in August, he meets with Donald Trump after the Americans put forward a peace plan built around the concept of compromise. And Vladimir Putin basically said, okay, I'll do the compromise. And the compromise appears to be basically freezing the line of contact and doing a land swap, meaning that where Russia occupies lands that are considered, Ukrainian, then Russia will keep those. And where Ukraine occupies land that Russia considers to be Russian, Ukraine gets to keep that. And they'll just draw the line there. They'll have the basis of a ceasefire. Moving on. Apparently in Anchorage, the Russians believe that the United States, having made the request for compromise and having embraced this, agreed to it. And yet nothing happened. Instead, what you see is a continued expansion of the war to include this 40-day drone war. And what you see now is that Russia has taken a very hard line on this now. They've gone back to basically unconditional surrender is how this war ends. But it's even worse than that. It means that the United States has lost its ability to function as a mediator. We're not trusted anymore. Russia's not believes that Alaska wasn't just a failure, but it was deliberately sabotaged by the United States that used Alaska as a mechanism of buying time for the Ukrainians to build up military resources. So the new reality is that this war ends on Russia's terms and Russia terms alone, and this will be very bad for Ukraine. It means that Ukraine will be significantly reduced in terms of its the territory, in terms of its economic potential. When Russia says, denazification, it means the end of the Zelensky affiliate with the Zelensky regime. When he says demilitarization, it means that every weapon that the United States and NATO has provided to Ukraine will either be destroyed, turned over to Russia, or returned home. But there will be no Western, weaponry. It means the physical destruction of Ukraine and the eradication of the Ukrainian government. Well, what we're watching is the unveiling of a national security architecture, global, that has been decades in the making. I mean, just look at what you started out with the military exercises in South Korea. This happened because Donald Trump, in the middle of the night, put out a social media posting that said that I've ordered the Secretary of War, Defense, to significantly reduce our involvement in these annual military exercises. These are the major military exercises that allow the United States and South Korean militaries to function in a cohesive fashion in case of war. These exercises, in addition to being annual in terms of their the scheduling, the planning for it begins months in advance. These are not simple exercises; they're complicated exercises. But these exercises are done to prepare a military establishment that now sits as the core feature of what we call the tripartite pact between the United States, South Korea, and Japan. If you remember, Joe Biden back in June of 2023, maybe, had the camp, held meetings at Camp David where he brought all these leaders together and they formalized this pact. It says the United States will be there for you. We're your security blanket. Don't worry. We got THAAD interceptors in South Korea. You got Patriot 3s in Japan. We're giving Japan 400 cruise missiles. You guys are part of our joint nuclear war planning now. You're part of you got big boy pants. You get to come to the big boy tent. And even as recently as last year in September, I believe, Trump reiterated the importance of this tripartite agreement. What's happened since then? Well, we ran out of ammunition in the Middle East, so we took away the THAAD battery in South Korea without asking. We took away the 3 PAC-3 batteries in Japan without asking. We denied Japan the ability to buy 400 cruise missiles with little coordination, and then we get upset when the president turns to South Korea and says, "Hey, could you come and help us open up the Strait of Hormuz?" And the South Korean president said, "No." Now, what could Korea bring? Nothing. They don't have a blue water navy. I mean, so how does Korea even factor into this thing? But Trump took umbrage of it, so he said significantly reduce the exercises. These exercises have been, months in the planning. They were supposed to happen, I think he put the tweet out Sunday night. The exercise is supposed to happen Monday morning. And that means that everybody who was planning everything suddenly was told, you're not doing this. I mean, it's just chaos. It's devastating. It reduces confidence in the United States, but it is reflective of the reality that America is, under Donald Trump, is looking for a way to reduce our exposure in the Pacific. He said, why should I maintain 39,000 troops in South Korea if this is, they don't want to help us? Why should we help them? And I think he's talking about reducing troops. With Iran, again, we got beat and we're leaving. All those military bases we had in the Gulf Arab countries are practically abandoned now. The United States is moving military resources out. We're in Saudi Arabia, we've moved into Jordan, we've moved into Europe, et cetera. And I think that's the direction we're heading. We're leaving. Why? Because, we were insufficient to the task. And we no longer have the trust and confidence of the Gulf Arab nations who previously, labored under the belief that they had an American security blanket that was going to keep them safe at night. Well, there is no American security blanket. We roll into Europe and Ukraine. The United States has, in effect, abandoned Ukraine. They talk about, opening up intelligence sharing, but when you dig deep enough, it just means that they're giving some basic access to commercial satellites, but we're not giving them really anything really good anymore. But Trump has done the same thing. He had a meeting, press conference where he was talking about NATO and U.S. forces. And he said they weren't there when we needed help. Maybe I'm not going to be there for them. And then he said, I think I made some breaking news here. Did anybody catch what I said? Yeah, he said he's withdrawing from NATO. I think that's true. We're looking at the United States in retrograde. It doesn't matter what our good friend Richard Medhurst might put out on his social media platform to the contrary. The reality is that the United States is in retreat. in the Pacific, in the Middle East, and in Europe. And I think people need to, reflect on this reality that we aren't the nation that we used to be, and we're definitely not the nation that Donald Trump thinks we are.